Hello, this is Mike at GameFromScratch, and welcome to week 34 of This Week in GameDev. A quick look and recap of the news and events in the world of game development for the week ending July the 11th of 2016. Now, last week we saw a bit of an influx of news. There was a bunch of stuff happened, whereas a couple of weeks before, almost nothing happened. And unfortunately, this week we're a little bit back towards the almost nothing happening side of the equation. There was a few announcements at the end of the week that saved me, because otherwise I was basically going to have a one-shot video. So this is going to be a little bit longer than that, but not the most exciting thing you've ever seen. Now, as always, there is a text-based version of this you can see right here. I will link this down below that has links to all of the stories we are about to cover. And let's jump right in. Now, first off this week, we saw the release of Meza 12.0.0. Now, Meza is an open source implementation of OpenGL, and it's actually grown beyond that, because OpenGL has grown way beyond being just OpenGL. So it's an open source implementation of a bunch of the Chronos narrated libraries. So we've got OpenGL, OpenAL, Vulkan, which is the next version of OpenGL. We've got their vision libraries, their open computing libraries, etc. So Meza is basically an open source implementation of all of those things. And where it comes in probably the most important, if we're honest, is on the Linux side of things. This is the driver provider for most OpenGL implementations in the Linux world. And the big things that we saw in Meza 12 were release of Vulkan drivers for Intel hardware for Ivy Bridge and onward, OpenGL 4.3 implementations for most modern GPUs, OpenGL ES implementations for NVIDIA and Radeon embedded chips, GL VND support for GLX OpenGL. No idea what actually that means. But by far and away, the big things here is support for Vulkan on Intel GPUs, modern GPUs from Intel anyways, and OpenGL 4.3 support. And of course, that Chronos implementation is, Chronos is picking up more and more and more as we go on. Another release this week was Cocos 2D X 3.12 was released. Now, Cocos 2DX is a cross-platform C++ based game library originally built on the Cocos platform, but it was re-implemented in C++. And then since then, Cocos 2DX has been ported to a number of platforms, C#, HTML5, etc. Now, the big things added in this particular release is experimental support for VR. Not really sure how that works because Cocos 2DX is a 2D library, but you can now support, I believe, Rift and Vive right now, but it's experimental level at this point. They also added Tizen support. I don't know anybody that's actually developing on Tizen or whatever the heck you however pronounce that, but it's actually supported by a strangely high number of game libraries, and now is supported by Cocos 2DX. Now, I do believe it's more popular overseas. So in the Asia-Pacific market, I think Tizen is more of a player. So perhaps in those segments where Cocos 2D is extremely popular, that might explain why it's been added. And some Android performance fixes, OB Android support, and WebGL improvements were also included in this particular release. Now, another interesting one, all right, screw you, Chrome, is continuous release. Now, I actually did a video on this. It's embedded in this link below. You can see it right here, or you can just see it back in my channel. Now, continuous is a really cool application. It was released this week on iOS, and it is basically a full port of the C# development environment. It is an IDE and code editor. It is the C# compiler and a bunch of the essential libraries. So basically, they ported the Roslyn compiler and a bunch of the Xamarin essential libraries plus the base.NET runtime over so you could run it on iOS. And this actually means that you can develop full C# applications on iOS. And that includes C# 6 support and even F# support if that's your thing. Now, there are a few things missing. There's no ability to set breakpoints that I could find at this point in time, and a few other things, but it's actually remarkably full-featured. It's $10 US, so it's not free by any means, but it is a really slick, well-implemented project. So if you want to actually do development, especially if you've got like an iPad Pro, or you work quite a bit on your iPad with a keyboard, it is very much a desktop-esque experience. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, I did a hands-on video that actually demonstrates continuous, but that was released this week. Another release this week was Tiled. Tiled 0.16.2 was released this week. Tiled is an open source map editor. It's a very, very cool project. Now, if you're interested, I've actually done a full tutorial series. It's linked down below. So you can see right here, I cover all the different aspects of creating 2D and isometric maps using Tiled. This release doesn't really add a ton of that much interesting stuff. There's a JSON plugin. They fixed the custom properties on terrains, and then they fixed something in the Lua plugins. Otherwise, it is mostly a matter of fixes to the editor itself. So that's available. It's 10.16.2, and the nice thing about Tiled is it's open source and completely free. So if you're working on 2D game, it's definitely one to check out. Another thing that happened this week, this is borderline newsworthy, is Microsoft officially rejected that they're going to do XNA 5. Now, this isn't shocking. They killed off XNA. Well, they effectively killed it off about 5 or 6 years ago when they fired the entire team. So that's normally a pretty good indication that XNA isn't going to happen. Now, I've always sort of sat back and wished they would realize, oh, damn, we screwed up here, and started the project back up. And I've kind of been holding out hope. And then a couple years ago, they officially killed off XNA. Or they basically came out and said, XNA 4 is done. This is dead end. If you want to develop games for Xbox cross-platform, go use Unity. It was their wonderful, wonderful move. But the thing is, since then, all of the idiots that killed off XNA that were at Microsoft are gone. Steve Svinowski, something along those lines. He's gone. Ballmer's gone. And a bunch of the guys from the Xbox division, well, actually, they're gone too. But some of them are there and are in a little bit more power. So there's always been a little bit of hope that they would revive XNA. Now, I'm a huge fan of XNA because it was kind of a code-focused cross-platform game engine. It actually worked quite well. It's very smooth. And coincidentally, if you are interested in learning more, I have a full Monogame tutorial series, both in video and text on GameFromScratch. And Monogame is essentially the spiritual successor to XNA. It is API compatible with XNA, also provides its own content pipeline, etc. So it is their slot-in placement. And in fact, Microsoft come out basically said, if you liked XNA, keep using Monogame. Now, the problem is, XNA was more than just the XNA framework. It was a built-in set of tools. It was MS Build. It was Visual Studio XNA Edition, essentially. So it was called, my brain's not coming to me, but they had a specialized version of Visual Studio before Express was a thing, but they made a version of Visual Studio that was specifically for creating games. And they also did forums and contests and the Xbox Live Independent Game Store, etc. They did a really awesome job, created incredible goodwill. They made a very good framework, and then they pissed it all away. So that sucked. And so some of us have kind of been, quietly hoping that XNA, they would see the error of their ways. They would do another XNA project at some point in the future. And then someone actually posted this. It says, please continue to work on XNA. It's great for indie developers, blah, 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 blah. You keep working on XNA so we C# developers can create amazing games for XNA 5 as a request for the Visual Studios board. And it came back as declined, ain't gonna happen. If you want to port, use Monogames. Otherwise, use Unity or something else. So very, very disappointing. XNA 5 is not going to happen from Microsoft, which sucks. And basically, if you want to come down here and read 382 pages of basically how much Microsoft sucks for doing this, it's a fun read. So again, kind of a non-news story, kind of depressing at the same time. So XNA 5 just ain't going to happen, which is unfortunate because I would love to have seen it happen. And they've basically confirmed that this week. And yeah, that's about it. It's been a slow news week. Hopefully next week will be full of excitement. We will see. We're in the summer. We're basically stuck in the doldrums. I'm not going to be really shocked if we have a few more weeks of light news reporting anyways. But I hope there was enough there of interest to you. By the way, if you want to keep up to date on these weekly news reports, I do one of these every week. I also do all kinds of tutorials. It's everything else on my channel. So if you do like what you saw here, please do click subscribe. And if you like this video, please do click like. I hope you enjoyed that. See y'all later.